Hi, Penny. So good to have you today at our third edition of the Progressive Soul Dialogues. I was thinking we could talk today about self awareness, consciousness, ego, just like navigate those waters a bit.
Hmm.
And what I have in mind exactly is starting the conversation with the mind and soul balance, being mindful and being aware, and how, going from the inside out
Oh,
is
that's cool. Yeah.
okay.
The first thing that pops into my mind when you say that mind and soul and what have you is I do think that nowadays we need to be more connected with our, not just our body and mind, but our body, mind, and soul. And that, when we look at our health and well-being, that we look at all aspects of ourselves. And so the soul, I would connect with spirituality or just, inner well-being. And I think that's a really key thing, especially because we're in a time of the COVID era. Let's just call it that. We're in a COVID era time. And so people are sort of, whether you call it forced or put into a position where perhaps they are starting to look inward and look at their personal satisfaction, their mental health. There's a lot about mental health at the moment and about keeping yourself in a good balance. So we can look at this in a number of ways, but I think that the most important aspect for just generally, for people generally, for society, is that we deal with ourselves internally and we look at what we like, what we don't like. We accept what's not perfect. No one's perfect. I know I'm not perfect. And I don't know if anyone else listening is going to resonate with this, but I've certainly met a lot of people who do. You know, I've been that people pleaser. I want to be everybody's friend. I want everybody to like me. I want to be in that space. And, you know, it's just not possible. And when you come to realize that, you then look at all the different aspects of yourself that you like, you don't like. And that takes you on that inner journey, that soul, if you like, that you mentioned there. And I really believe and know from my own experience that our soul is always trying to guide us and speak to us and sort of remind us that there's more to our being than just the physical and the mental. And that soul or that soul's calling, that soul's journey is about a personal expression, is about looking at our emotion, looking at how we deal with things inwardly and outwardly, observing ourselves. So that can be quite an interesting thing, which I think sometimes we tend to act and react to things as opposed to sort of observing ourselves in the process. Or, I think I've gotten to the point personally where I'm on a bit of a delay. So sometimes I catch myself in a moment and sometimes I reflect afterwards and then hopefully relay the track and put down a more positive way of interacting with things. So I just noticed that I've been interrupted by my television. Isn't that funny? Anyway.
Happens to the best of us. You actually touched on something really, I mean, again, you must be a psychic. That joke is not going to get old anytime soon. Um, but you mentioned our soul's calling, and I wanted to ask you about this hiding versus accepting our calling, and how do we go about embracing destiny in a way in which we work with it, not against it, if you
Mm.
know where I'm heading with that. How
Yeah.
do we go about that, and how do we make it work for us in a way in which we acknowledge it working for us, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that can be tricky because we tend to, and I might have touched on this in prior conversations. I think we tend to grow up with learned behaviors and so forth, and we tend to be drawn into, you know, thinking or sort of, getting asked at the age of 5, what are you going to be when you grow up? And, having these
Ouch. Yeah.
idealized views and, that kind of thing. And in just sidetracking, when I was a little girl, everybody was going to be a nurse, a doctor, and all these wonderful things. And you sort of hear children nowadays, and it's like, I'm going to be famous. So it's gone from these really kind of professional, aspirational kind of careers into just being famous. But anyway, I digress. So I think, and that kind of does tie into the whole soul thing and listening, because yeah, sure, some of us will be famous and some of us just clearly don't want to be. But I do believe that our soul's trying to remind us that there's more to us than the mental and the physical aspects, but all of them work together. And part of that soul's calling is to know that we're invincible. And I think this is what people forget, that we can easily, the mind can sort of turn negative, or be like, if somebody puts us down, that then becomes like a record that plays in the mind. And then we make that groove deeper, because we believe what we've been told, that we're not good enough, that we can't do something. And so we talk ourselves into, or rather out of, something. And where our soul would be trying to say, hey, there's more to you than what you think of yourself. And so our soul's trying to say, get up and keep going, and you can do this, you've got this. And so then sometimes there becomes that tug of war between the mind and the soul, let's say. And depending on the influences you have around you, whether that be people, whether that be media, whether that be what you read, what you watch, whatever form or shape that takes, will help you to start to listen to that soul's calling, and not listen to that record player in the mind, and to work with the mind rather than against, if that makes sense. So it's more a case of mastering your mind, which will then start to listen to the soul's calling, as opposed to letting the mind run rampant and chaotic. And then the soul's got more of a job to cut through that kind of traffic. So there's lots of ways that people can start to do that. It could be through meditation, it could be going for walks, some of the things that we may have touched on before, or others, of course, out there talk about. And it's observing, which I was touching on before the electronic world decided to interrupt. So yeah, so it's carving out that space to listen as well.
That's that's really powerful stuff, Penny. Hear that, folks? We're invincible. Remind yourself that next time you're in a bit of a rut. Um, Going back to what you mentioned about the knowing, I'd like to talk to you about the process of getting in tune with yourself and the world, with the seasons, with the inner happening. Um, it's that groundness that we've touched on briefly in some of our previous conversations. Any There's no silver bullet, obviously, but
Mm.
any details on this process?
Well, I do think that we're all individuals. So You know, we're all unique, we're all special, we all have something to offer. And, you know, without trying to be cliched, the world wouldn't be the same without us in it, for in whatever way, shape, or form that may be. And I guess there's going to be people who may listen to this that will recognize this. You know, there was a period of time in my teens and early 20s where I felt lost. I really didn't understand how I belonged in the world, but that my soul was saying there was more to me. And I just didn't know where to go and how to find what this, I just knew it was that knowing there's more to life than whatever it appears to be. And I think that's part of the whole illusion of the physical world, because we are kind of caught up in the material side, which is the mental side. So materialism and mentalism go together. And we do get sidetracked by a lot of those sorts of things happened earlier in this program. And so at the same time, you know, we're also this spiritual, we have this spiritual aspect or this soul aspect that is invincible, that no one can take from us, no one can change. And it's been able to connect those two things to get them to harmonize. And along with the physical self, part of the physical self is that harmony between the mental and the soul. And so I'm probably sidetracking, but it would probably be for a good reason. And really, is a lot of people out there at some point in their life, whether it's young or older, that just get to that point where their soul's calling out, there's more to you, there's more to life than, you know, the mental material side of things. And that's when people start searching, and they may start looking into all different types of philosophies of life. And personally, for me, spiritualism is what helped me so much, because it allowed me to understand the various aspects of myself and that invincibility, and that continuation of life beyond the physical. And it's it is powerful in the sense that when you realize that your consciousness, so that even that mental aspect survives physical death, and there is a continuation, it also means there's no escape. So anything that you might not have worked on and resolved in the physical world, there's still time. The positive is there's still time in the spiritual or in the next phase of life for your soul to work on that. And that's wonderful and it's healing. But hey, wouldn't it be so much better if we started now? And so part of my soul's journey has been to discover this, thank goodness, and to do that inner journey work, and to understand that there's more to this world than the physical. Because to me, my understanding is the physical is the illusion.
Well, that's definitely something we need to get our heads around. So I'm guessing
Mm.
folks will listen to this show at least a couple of times before um, before they make sense of it. Um, you touched on something really important, which is the commitment to do the work
Yeah.
and getting that tuned with ourselves. So I think this is where ego steps in. And we mentioned ego at the
Sure.
beginning of our conversation. So how do we um, not balance? I'm not sure balance is the right word here. How do we integrate ego into this work we're doing, and how could we commit to do this work inside and out in a way that serves us first and foremost, and then
Well,
contributes to the world?
you know, the first thing that comes to mind is honesty, and honesty with self. Sometimes we don't always see ourselves the way everybody else sees us, but we need to, part of that inner work is to be really honest with ourselves, and to listen. You know, if somebody is a bit critical of us, well, you know, reflect, be honest with yourself, dig deep. You know, maybe they're not 100% right, maybe there's an edge of their ego in that, but you know, there might also be, maybe it's 50-50, maybe 50% of what they've said is correct. And, you know, you've got to be honest with yourself to look in on that for yourself. Where are you coming from? When, you know, if you say something to somebody and they retaliate negatively towards that, you know, what is it that you've done to be a part of that creation? So honesty with self is the most important thing. And I think sometimes we can grow up around supportive people and maybe too supportive, and you know, you can do no wrong, so therefore you don't think you can do any wrong. So you know, our life circumstances will shape some of that, but the key really is the honesty with self, because without that you're not going to be able to really progress with that inner journey work if you can't accept that there are things that you need to work on for yourself, you know. um, and it's not about a self assassination. Oh, I don't like this about myself and I don't like that. What it's about is going, okay, I'm really awkward in social situations. I don't particularly want to put myself in the middle of a party, but if I am going to do that, how can I work on myself or try to work on myself to be the best I can be in that situation rather than going into a defense mode? And I use that example because I am an introvert. Despite the way things might come across. So you've got to acknowledge that in yourself. Be honest. It's difficult to be in large social gatherings. So find ways in which you can not put yourself under pressure to perform in that, but to put yourself into situations where you're going to perform at your best. So you need to be honest about yourself. You need to be honest with where you're, the way you see yourself, with the way others might see yourself, um, and knowing your limitations. I know that's a limitation of mine, but equally, you know, there are strengths as well. So it's not focusing on weaknesses, it's acknowledging where your strengths and weaknesses are and accepting those strengths and weaknesses and working on it from there and building your way up.
I think this ties in really well with what we were talking about intentions and
Mm,
setting intentions and in being in that mindset. And I see these two aspects as a huge part of the progressive soul. They
yeah,
they seem to come together in ways that I'm sure I'm not even acknowledging completely if I'm being honest. Um, so that's really powerful stuff. Um, and I find it so amazing when we talk about these things, you can see threads and you can see how they can be brought together under an umbrella, but they're all their own individual thing, and we have a lot of work to do with ourselves first and foremost.
for sure.
So, as a short reminder to try and bring it all together, we need to carve space and time to observe and be still. We should learn to master our mind so that we can listen to our soul's calling, and most importantly, we need to remind ourselves that we're invisible. Oh, not invisible. Sorry, invincible.
That was a Freudian slip if I ever heard one. Invincible, folks, invincible.
Anything, anything else you'd like to add here, Penny?
Oh, look, I think that was a really good summary. And isn't it funny? We've had like a bit of a funny session where things haven't gone quite right. But I think that's really symbolic of life. You know, it doesn't matter how much you plan for things or how much you try to do the right thing. Sometimes things pop up and create a little bit of chaos, but you've got to laugh about it too, right?
Exactly. At least we're dealing gracefully with it. Well then, I guess it's a wrap. Thank you folks for listening, and we look forward to seeing you, well, engaging with you in our next episode. Thank you.
Thanks, Andra.